Hey,
Yep. All right.
good morning, everyone. Welcome to our virtual bird walk. We started doing these earlier this year when COVID hit. We have resumed many of our in-person field trips, so please check our website and come out and join us in person. But today we are very excited to be down at the Clayton County Water Authority at various sites for their Wetlands and Watershed Festival. So we're going to be showing off some of the wonderful birding locations down at the Clayton County Water Authority. We've got 3 of our staff members here today, Karina Newsom, Adam Betchwell, and Gabe Anderley. And they're spread out at some great locations. They're going to show you some interesting things today. Before we get started, I just want to remind you about a couple of upcoming events. Next Wednesday, we have a sip and draw with author of the Sibley Field Guide, David Sibley himself. So please check our events page for that. We will be continuing our virtual bird walks a little longer, so the next one will be in 2 weeks. Please tune in again. But I'm sitting at home today, so I want to quickly throw it over to my co-workers, and Karina's going to tell you about another exciting Facebook Live event that we have coming up next week. And then we're going to get started with some birding this morning.
All right. Thank you so much, Melanie. I really quickly wanted to let everyone know that Georgia Audubon has partnered with the Amphibian Foundation, which is also here in Atlanta, to bring some really awesome virtual educational programming, both to the general public and to schools. And we're starting off with a Facebook Live next Thursday. We'll be going live twice, once at 9 a.m. and once at 5:30 p.m. And both of those Facebook Lives will introduce you to some really awesome species of reptiles and amphibians that are native both to Georgia, as well as species from around the globe. So we will have different species at both of those events. So if you can tune into both, I would definitely encourage you to do so. Gather your kids, gather your adults. It'll be a lot of fun being able to see some live animals that are cared for and conserved by the Amphibian Foundation. So please do join us again for next Thursday, October 15th at 9 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Danielle, who's going to tell you a little bit about where we are today.
Hi, everyone. As she said, my name is Danielle. I'm the senior conservationist here at Newman Wetlands Center. Newman Wetlands Center is owned by Clayton County Water Authority, and Clayton County has this unique system, a water reuse system that we use to recycle our treated wastewater so that we can have a sustainable water source even in a drought. And it's this incredible habitat that you guys can maybe see behind me. They're called constructed treatment wetlands. There's over 500 acres. In addition to being a really cool, sustainable water reuse system, they are an awesome habitat for wildlife, especially birds. It's kind of a unique habitat in the Piedmont. There really isn't any, there aren't any big marshes like this elsewhere in the Piedmont. So we're going to explore them. If anyone is interested in visiting, we do have a permit system that we offer. It's $40 for a whole year, and we include guided trips out to this trip. If you want to learn more, you can reach out to us at Newman Wetlands Center or check out the Clayton County Water Authority page. If there, do you guys have questions? Am I leaving anything out? The co-birders here.
I'll let you know if any questions come up in the chat.
Okay, great. I'm going to give the phone back to Karina so that she can spot us some birds.
All right. Do any of you have birds in the scope or in view right now?
Yeah, I can hop in if you guys are still looking. Unless Gabe, feel free to chime in. Well, good morning, everybody. This is Adam, Conservation Director for Georgia Audubon, and I'm at the E.L. Huey Wetlands, the holding ponds. And this is a pretty well-known hotspot down here at Clayton County. It's a spot, and Daniel will correct me later if I'm mistaken, you can get a pass to come in here certain days of the week. accessibility changes throughout the seasons, but it's
That
a
is correct.
fantastic. Okay, great. It's a fantastic hotspot. Many birders have been down here and seen, I'm sure, countless lifer, waterfowl and shorebirds. It's a great location. Right now I'm going to show you the ponds. They're pretty full with water, so it's a little late for shorebird migration. So there's not much really coming through, and there's too much water. And we're just at the beginnings of waterfowl showing up. But I do have some exciting birds. So let me flip my camera around here, and I will try to show you some. So bear with me just a moment as I move you around a little bit. All right, so we'll start off with a crowd favorite here. Our first bird, of course, let me tweak a little bit, is one of our larger wading birds. We have our great blue heron down here. And so the Huey wetlands and the treatment wetlands, if you're lucky enough to go on one of those tours with Danielle or other Clayton County staff, is just a fantastic spot for a variety of birds. They mentioned the constructed wetlands. They're great for waterfowl, for wading birds like this great blue heron. As someone who really likes the more rare birds, it's a great spot for rails. So I already told Karina and Danielle I was going to be very jealous if they found a rare rail while I was over here at the wetlands. But happy to show you this great blue heron. And there are also about a half dozen of its slightly smaller relatives, the great egret. So here in the Piedmont, there we go. The great egret is by far the most common of the white wading birds that we have. If you're lucky enough to head down to the Georgia coast, oh, there he goes, flying away. It's not going too far. The great egret's the most common. So they're large. They have those black legs. I'm going to pivot to the right, so pardon my movement, just to show you the other great egrets we have. So large white bird with those black legs and a bright yellow solid beak. If you head down to our Georgia coast or to parts of the coastal plain, you're also going to find snowy egrets. They do show up in the Piedmont. Actually, I was with Danielle and others at the treatment wetlands last week, and we had a snowy egret, kind of a rare sighting. So snowy egrets, smaller, and they have those black legs with yellow slippers and a black beak with a yellow face. And then cattle egrets are another bird that you can find here in Georgia. Pretty uncommon in the immediate, kind of Atlanta metro area. But if you get down to Southwest Georgia and find those cattle farms, sure enough, you're going to find cattle egrets kind of walking behind them and looking for larger insects that the livestock might scare up. So also here this morning, besides these two larger wading birds, I've had some mallards fly by. I have some green-winged teal, which I'll show you in just a moment. Most exciting, at least for me, is I just had a Wilson snipe flush up, and I saw roughly where it landed. So in a few minutes when I pass the zoom over to Gabe, I will go see if I can relocate it. But let me pivot here once again to see if these teal are still in the back corner here. There is one of our birds. See if I can zoom in a little bit. There we go. Look at that. If you use your imagination, you can actually see the green spot on the wing of that sleeping green-winged teal. So the head's on the right side. It's tucked in back over its shoulder. And there's just a little bit of a really beautiful green color on their side, which is where they get their name. We also have blue-winged teals here in Georgia and pretty good numbers depending on the season. And both of them have that namesake color in their wing. Blue in the one wing, green in the other. The males of these two species look strikingly different when they're in their breeding plumage. But if you get young birds or females or birds in eclipse plumage, when they're not showing their mating colors and they're molting their feathers, they can be somewhat drab and difficult to tell apart. The green-winged teals are normally a bit darker and don't have as much of an obvious kind of eye line with pale on the eyebrow and on the cheek. But that's a sleeping green-winged teal. Oh, there it goes. They're flying. There's a whole crew of them. So those are some of the birds that I'm seeing so far. We've also had a couple swallows. So tree swallows are here in pretty good numbers. Make sure you check your tree swallows closely. This time of year, the females and young birds are around and they're a bit more brown. So they could easily be confused for a rough-winged swallow if you're not paying attention, or even a bank swallow. Now, both of those are probably, they've left the area for the most part. Rough-winged swallows are, maybe down in the Yucatan or other parts further south. But keep an eye out. I did have a barn swallow as well. So swallow flocks are a bit tricky because those birds never stop moving. But, there could be anything mixed in there. So keep your eyes open. We'll I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Gabe, who's at the Wetland Center, and that will allow me to reposition and maybe, fingers crossed, find a snipe for everyone. So Gabe, what's going on over there?
Hello, everyone. This is Gabe Anderley, Conservation Program Coordinator. And as Adam said, I'm over at the actual Wetlands Center itself, so I'll turn my camera around so you can see. And right now I'm in the parking lot area. So the building is right over there. And there's some feeders right here in front of the building, which are obviously a great place to check to see if there's birds. But one thing that I find is that if the feeders are really active, sometimes there'll be a lot of birds that are kind of comfortable with the large flock of birds that are around. And so you get some other birds in the periphery of that bird activity. And so it can be a great place to start looking for birds. And so that's what I've been doing. I haven't even made it out of the parking lot yet because there's a lot of exciting stuff happening. And now right in front of me, I have two birds on the ground. And they are we have two different kinds. Okay, so they are shaped like a robin, and that's because they are a thrush, just like a robin is. And they're currently on the ground picking up a bunch of little red berries. And I actually have, I picked up a couple of these berries so I could show you guys. So I'm gonna turn my camera around. So these are the berries, and these are actually from dogwood. So that's another thing to think about when you're out birding, especially this time of year. Different trees are going to be producing fruit. So these berries on this dogwood are a great food source for these little thrushes that I'm looking at now. So you can look for these red berries on the ground or up in the trees. And here's a leaf that was on the ground from the dogwood. They have a really distinct vein pattern. So the veins on the leaves, these little lines that are going, they kind of start at the bottom, they go up and almost run parallel with the main vein, the center vein in the leaf. And so that can be another way to try and identify dogwood in your area. But it's a great native, and there's a couple different varieties here. And yeah, so as I mentioned, we have a couple of thrushes on the ground feeding on these berries. And I'm going to try and go through my binoculars so you can potentially see, but you can see the picnic bench there, and there's actually a bird on that fence behind the picnic bench, and it is a really reddish brown or orangish brown thrush, and it has these really rather large dots or speckles on the chest, and now there's a bird on the table that's a little less reddish brown, but the reddish brown one with the bigger dots that I was describing is a wood thrush. And now the bird that's on the table hopping down is actually a Swainson's thrush. And we have quite a few different species. Now it's on the ground down there. We have several species of thrush that are coming through right now because of migration, and looking for areas that are have fruiting trees can be one of the best ways to spot them. And these thrushes can be pretty tough to identify. I know I'm not always extremely confident with all of my IDs, so I make sure that I get a really good look at all of the field marks and characteristics and behavior of the birds, so that I can try and get a confident ID. But really, yeah, the things you want to look for are their chest, also their facial patterns and colorations can be really helpful in identifying whether you're looking at a Swainson's thrush, a veery, a gray-cheeked thrush. All of those birds can be easily confused, but finding fruiting trees in the fall can be a great way to get some practice looking and identifying those birds. So thought I should point that out. And there's really a lot of activity right here. As I mentioned, if there's birds that are kind of in the area, sometimes more birds will be comfortable. I had two scarlet tanagers also feeding on the fruit in the dogwood. There's a yellow-billed cuckoo over here as well. And right now I'm not getting super good looks at any of that. And it looks like Adam might have a bird. So Adam, if you want to hop on really quick.
Yeah, I'm surprised I have a nice palm warbler that's sitting still for a minute. Palm warblers are one of our more common late migrant warblers. Look at that bobbing in the tail and how the brightest yellow is underneath the tail. There it goes. So kind of a browny yellow bird in general, but that tail bobbing and that lemony yellow under the tail are kind of the best characteristics to look for those birds. And even though they're palm warblers, you know, they're really common in Florida and in parts of Georgia throughout the winter months. They breed up in the boreal forest in a very non-palm type habitat. So it's an interesting name. And then not far behind it, we have a nice eastern phoebe, another bird that likes to bob its tail, and the only flycatcher that we regularly have overwintering in the Atlanta area. All the other ones go down to the tropics, so there's a lot more flies. But these phoebes, which I'm sure many of you know from hanging around your backyard or even nesting under the cover of your porch. But those are a couple birds I have.
Hey,
so,
Adam, I have to pause you. Here's why. We have an otter. Wait. Oh, shoot.
Just watch, it'll come back.
Okay, so right now in this pond, we've got. Okay. Yes. Okay, I see. We've got a couple of different really awesome birds. We're going to pause for the mammals just for a second here. So we are at one of the kind of ponds here in the treatment wetlands, which is a great spot for all kinds of birds, as well as semi-aquatic mammals like otters. And of course, as soon as the camera comes out, the otter goes away. But Adam, I'm so sorry. I just had to pop it up for him real quick. We can go back to the birds you're identifying just now, but I had to try and get that in the camera.
Actually,
go for it.
Karina,
Yeah.
while you're on, there was a question about how many species of birds can regularly be seen at the Clayton County Water Authority properties. And I saw Danielle answered it in the chat, but I bet others would be curious to know.
Yeah, well, Danielle can tell you.
Hi. We do bird surveys quarterly. Actually, Carol Lambert, who used to be in the position I'm in, leads those. And we have over 150 species listed. Some years we get more and some years we get less. I think that the otter is on the back.
The otter? Oh my goodness.
I don't see its head, but
this is the most tantalizing situation. Thank you, Danielle, for that information. So yeah, about 100, you said 150 species?
Yeah.
That's really awesome.
Is that an otter or a grebe?
Ahead here. So we've got some, in addition to an otter that is playing games with our emotions right now, we've got some pied-billed grebes out here on the pond. And there we go, flying off. Oh, teal. The grebe is still here. So grebes are really cool water birds because they are capable of adjusting their buoyancy in some pretty extreme ways. So they're much better at, you know, being agile and fully submerged underwater, maybe better than some other waterfowl. And they primarily like to eat invertebrates like crustaceans. And out here we've got lots of actually, what are they called? They're invasive crayfish, Danielle? And swamp crayfish. And when I tell you out here, there are the ground and the grass is just scattered with these corpses of the swamp crayfish, which are an invasive species introduced in Louisiana. Is that right?
No, they're
From Louisiana. Sorry, from Louisiana, invasive here.
They're the ones we use for food.
Yeah. So if you ever have like a crayfish boil, I'm not from the South, but the crayfish that people tend to eat are these crayfish. And so you out here at the on the roads and on the sides of the water bodies, you'll see places where birds have clearly had a meal because there are just the shells of these crayfish everywhere. And so great blue herons, snowy egrets, like we saw with Adam, including these little grebes, love to eat these invertebrates. But Adam, my apologies. Go ahead, take it back. If you are seeing some cool birds, I just had to interrupt and throw that otter in there and get slightly distracted with everything else that's going on at this pond.
Yeah, no problem. I was desperately trying to find this Wilson snipe, but if anyone's ever looked for those, they understand how camouflaged they are. This bird's a little far off, but there's a real nice adult red-shouldered hawk there in the distance, perched on one of the signs. I'm sure there's nothing using that nest box right now with the hawk right there. On these kind of lone posts out here, from my experience out at the Huey ponds, it's pretty common to find raptors like this, or even kestrels, depending on the time of the year, or merlins, other falcons. So there's a nice red-shouldered hawk. Again, you can see that beautiful reddish breast and the black and white patterned wing. Besides that, like I mentioned, I was trying to find this snipe. It kind of landed in a dry field, and I'm just having no luck picking it up. We also have a good number of cormorants out here right now, which I'll show you next time I plug in. I'm kind of looking at the sun to see them. And then many of the songbirds that we frequently hear, I've been hearing eastern towhees, kind of given their abbreviated towhee call, not the whole drink your tea song. Barn, tree swallows, everyone's favorite European starling, the non-native bird that has dominated most of our country. Yeah, those are the main birds I've had. I've heard a really soft, sweet little chip note that I believe is probably a savanna sparrow, but I haven't got a good look at it quite yet. So that would be pretty neat if I can show you on the scope. Savanna sparrows are kind of tricky for some people. They look a lot like song sparrows, but they're a bit paler and a bit more sleek. They have a pinkish bill, so a pale colored bill. And one thing that I've read that I like to tell people when they're working on their streaky sparrows, especially song versus savanna, is that it looks like someone drew the striping on a song sparrow with crayon and someone did a savanna sparrow with a pen. It's a bit more neater and finer. It's not super fine like you might see in a Cape May warbler or a Lincoln sparrow, but the quality and the thickness and the messiness of the streaking can be really helpful, especially with your sparrow ID. So actually, before I kick it back to Gabe, I can swing this around. The birds are behaving a little bit and moving away from the sun. There's a nice group, again, a little bit backlit, so they're going to be silhouetted, of double-crested cormorants. I don't know what a group of cormorants is called, but if you have an idea or a cool name to make up for cormorants, put that in the chat. But yeah, double-crested cormorants looking very regal with their heads pointed up, kind of drifting out of one of the ponds here. You can't really make it out. They have kind of a nice orangey yellow bill, and I don't know if they're the favorites of many people, but when they get in the breeding plumage, they get some really beautiful color on their face and blues, and they're pretty neat birds. And they're often sitting out, drying off their wings after diving for fish or other animals. So yeah, those are double-crested cormorants, and before that I had a red-shouldered hawk. And Gabe was doing a fantastic job trying to describe those brown-back thrushes. Those are a really tricky bird ID for people. We have 5 kind of regularly occurring species with the wood thrush, the veery, the Swainson's, the gray-cheeked thrush, and the hermit thrush. Undoubtedly, there are some Bicknell's thrush that are going undetected that are passing through our state as they go down to Cuba for the winter. If you've never heard of a Bicknell's thrush, it's a really rare bird that breeds in the mountains of the Northeast, the Adirondacks and the Green Mountains and the White Mountains up in New Hampshire and Vermont, and then into Quebec. But really cool.
Hey, Adam.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I have
please.
a marsh wren. I have a marsh wren here, and it's making. Oh, I don't know if you can see it. It's right here in the grass. It was making very distinct call. I'll give it. There we go. You hear that? I'll give it one more chance here so you can hear that. Yes. So there are marsh wrens over here because this is, of course, perfect habitat for a marsh wren. They love wetlands. And wrens in general are, as you might know, very small birds, but they are just chock full of personality. And wrens across wren species, so whether you're talking about house wrens, Carolina wrens, marsh wrens, they are really well known for their kind of hyper-territorial behavior. So when they have a territory, particularly during the breeding season, they will defend it fiercely. And I study seaside sparrows, which are a sparrow that lives out on the coast of Georgia, along with some other states on the Atlantic coast and on the Gulf Coast. And marsh wrens are about almost half their size. And they are extremely fierce defenders of their territory, so much so that they will fly to the nests of seaside sparrows. They will poke holes in the eggs to kill them. They have been documented, other wren species have been documented to actually kill the already hatched offspring of other birds, as well as other other wrens in their own species. So they will do whatever it takes to protect their territories. And so this is my first time seeing a marsh wren anywhere that is not on the coast. I'm used to seeing them. One's coming in really closely. They know I'm talking about them. I'm used to seeing them out on the coast in the salt marshes, but they also will spend time and live in freshwater marshes as well, which is basically what we have here. We've got cattails and lots of other grasses that you'll find in freshwater marshes. And so seeing these marsh wrens today has just been an absolute treat. But I will pass it back over to Adam. Again, I keep interrupting Adam. I keep seeing some really cool stuff out of these in these wetlands. But continue what you were saying, Adam, about all of our amazing thrushes.
No, I think I got the general gist down there with those brownback thrushes. Again, looking at their spots and their back color, I won't belabor that too much. One thing I will say about the marsh wrens.
If I could jump in for just a second, I think someone had a question to point out. You have been doing it, most of you, but if the birds are residents, year-round residents or migrants, as you're talking about them, you have mentioned it for some, but just, if you could make a point, someone was curious. Like the marsh wren, for example, is that a year-round resident or a migratory bird or?
Well, that's perfect because that was exactly what I was about to say. So one thing about Karina's marsh wren experience, on the Georgia coast, we have our own resident subspecies, the Griceps, the Worthington's marsh wren that lives in the salt marsh, and they're much grayer. They blend in with that exposed mud that we have out in the marsh. The bird that we have here, or that they have here in the marsh, is almost certainly from the Palastris group. So it's almost definitely a migrant from the Midwest coming down or from further north. So in Georgia, depending on where your marsh wren is, you could have one or two different subspecies, and it could be a resident bird or it could be a migratory bird. So I was just on the coast last weekend and actually saw both out in the salt marsh off of Little St. Simon's Island. We had the Palastris and the Griceps, the Worthingtons, next to each other. So that's exactly what I was going to say. So thank you for the question. That was perfect. Gabe, I'll go ahead and kick it over to you if you have anything. Any cool songbirds?
Yeah, so I am still in the parking lot here at the Newman Wetlands Center because it's so great and there's so many birds around, and just kind of hanging around the feeder, and also wanted to point out a couple of other things to you. But right here, just at the feeder station, there's been some chickadees. That's what just flew off. There's been pine warblers that have come in. There's been white-breasted nuthatches, tufted titmice. There was an eastern phoebe flying around the area. There's also Tennessee warblers up in the trees surrounding the space. So you can hear the chickadee. There's quite a few of them now right here hanging out the feeder. But as I was talking about the thrushes earlier, and as Adam was talking about them, I wanted to point out another great place to look for thrushes this time of year. I mentioned the dogwood earlier, but right here in front of the Wetland Center, we have this plant, which has these awesome little colorful berries, and this is the American beautyberry. And these fruit are ripe right now, and a lot of birds are coming in and feeding on these. So this can be, if you have beautyberry in your backyard or in the forest or the park near your house, you can camp out near some beautyberry and watch to see what birds come in and feed on it. As we were talking, there's a pine warbler chilling on the feeder. Let's see if I can get that in the camera for you guys. And of course, there it's back. Little yellow pine warbler hanging out, checking out what's at the feeding station. But yeah, as we were talking about what birds are resident and what birds are not resident or migrating through, a really important thing that we like to highlight and point out is one of the obstacles that many of these migratory species and even some of our residents deal with, and that's windows and glass. They have a tough time recognizing glass as an obstacle, and we get a lot of issues with bird collisions, which all usually stem, they happen for a variety of reasons, but a lot of light in the cities can attract birds during migration and disorient them, and they end up in places where they might not have intended to be, and then they find themselves in cities or areas where there's glass and they don't recognize it and they run into it. But one way you can solve that issue is something that Newman Wetlands has here. So you can see on the building, the windows are covered with this awesome stuff called Kaleidoscape. It's a window film, and you can see out when you're on the inside, and obviously you can't see in when you're looking from out here, but you can put these awesome images on it. You can customize it. It could be something you put up, you know, either at your house or at your place of work. And essentially this goes on the outside of the window and it deters birds from flying into the windows. So it's making these windows safe for birds. And there's all sorts of different designs. You can do dot patterns. You can do clear kaleidoscapes. So those windows over there are actually treated as well. But as we have birds coming through and migrating, there's so many collisions. And so one way to try and prevent this is putting up these films. And Georgia Audubon actually got a grant through Georgia Ornithological Society to help put these up here at the Newman Wetlands Center. And so it's a really cool feature that I wanted to point out and really highlight, because this time of year is really when a lot of bird collisions are happening. And so if you have this happening at your house, you can, you know, you could buy fancy film, or you could just temporarily write on the windows with markers. And we recommend like 2-inch spacing or 2 to 4-inch spacing, depending on your situation. But there's all sorts of things. And Adam is our safe flight man, so he really organizes a lot of the programming around that. So he might have some extra stuff to say. But thinking about windows as we're watching these awesome migratory birds and thrushes and all sorts of stuff is something we want to highlight, because it's really important. It's kills up to I think it's 1 billion birds a year that potentially just here in the United States every year succumb to window collisions. So another thing to think about. But yeah, the feeder has kind of slowed down, so I'm going to start moving away from the building. And really quickly, one other thing I want to point out is here at the Wetlands Center, they have this awesome sign right here, and this says Wildlife Sanctuary. So they are certified wildlife sanctuary. You can see it's Atlanta Audubon, which is what Georgia Audubon used to be. And we're currently updating our signs for the sanctuary program, but it's an awesome program to recognize places that are really providing great habitat for birds. And you can find out more information about our sanctuary program on our website. But it's a great way to, like I said, highlight places. And we have sanctuaries that are small gardens in people's backyards to wonderful big places like this, like Newman Wetlands Center. So yeah, I'm gonna make my way onto the trails now, and hopefully I can spot some more birds, but I'm gonna pass it along to whoever else has something.
Karina, I'm happy to go unless you guys got some more exciting marsh birds.
Trying to ID a bird. We've got a palm warbler. Okay, thank you, Danielle. That is moving around the ground here, which I'm sure I will not be able to get in the binoculars, but it's doing kind of like a little bit of tail bobbing, which is one of the kind of behavioral cues to let you know that it's a palm. But go ahead, Adam, take it away.
Yeah, so I'll just add a little bit more to what Gabe said. He did a great job about the window collision work that we've done with Newman Wetlands and others. And as always, we thank GOS for the funds to make that possible. You know, kind of referencing the thrushes that we just mentioned, all of those birds are migratory, and they are among the top, 15 most common birds that we find running into buildings in Atlanta, especially the wood thrush and the Swainson's thrush. One thing that they do is they give a lot of nocturnal flight calls. And so especially, if you can't sleep, or if you're an early riser, get out before sunrise, you can often hear the thrushes calling overhead, and actually can identify them just from their single nocturnal flight calls. So if you want to practice with that, it's something that's really cool that I like to do on occasion. The only problem is the birds have been shown to give more flight calls like that when they're flying over a well-lit area. So the theory is that as they're calling, they're sucking in their fellow species with them into these bright areas, and that's why they're more likely to collide than some species that don't. So I'm here as a resource. If you go to our Project Safe Flight page on the Georgia Audubon site, or you can find my email on the website, I'm happy to help you. I think what Newman Wetlands has done is one of our cooler installations, but you're probably not going to want to put a picture of a great blue heron on your bay window. But there are much more sleek options, as Gabe mentioned. So let me get back to the birds here. I got one that I can get in the scope for you all. It's been very cooperative. Oh, looks like my phone has shifted slightly. Let me adjust this. There we go. There we are. And you might recognize that one. Let me zoom in a little bit. That is a belted kingfisher. It's kind of far off. Looks like it is a male. There we go, showing you a nice silhouette there. So female kingfishers, belted kingfishers, have a little bit of that orangish color on their sides. They actually are more colorful than the males, which isn't always the norm across many of our songbirds. But these belted kingfishers love to eat small fish. So he's on a railing right now looking down at the water, so maybe he'll take off. They'll dive in, and they have amazing vision. They're able to account for the reflection and the refraction of the light, and can better pinpoint exactly where the small minnows and other aquatic prey are when they dive in. This is the only type of kingfisher that we have throughout most of the U.S. You can get ringed kingfisher, which is like the jumbo-sized version of a belted, down in parts of Texas. But if you go down into the tropics, the tropical Americas, there's Amazon kingfisher and American pygmy kingfisher and green and rufus, I think is the name. So all sorts of cool kingfishers, and it's a bird that I never tire of seeing around any of our Georgia waterways or ponds or rivers. So a really cool male that we have perched over there. You can probably hear behind me, that's a killdeer. Hopefully we'll get some that will stop down real close. I'll show you the killdeer. The killdeers are a type of plover. So they're a shorebird. They're the most common, throughout the year here in Metro Atlanta and throughout most of the state. If you're one of the few lucky ones who happen to spend a lot of time on the coast, you will probably find semi-palmated plovers and maybe piping plovers or even Wilson's plovers, depending on where you are. And there are a few other really cool ones. But the killdeer is the one that most of us are going to be familiar with, as they are a bit more tolerant of humans and will kind of go to any sort of gravel patch or exposed mud flat. They're kind of all over the place, and sometimes you even find them, nesting in the green space of a Kroger parking lot or something like that. They're not that picky, and they do that amazing broken wing display. So if you come too close to a killdeer nest, it will act like it has a broken wing to lure you as a would-be predator away from its eggs. And then once you get to a safe distance, it will fly off and think that it's tricking you and one-upping you. So a really cool behavior. I'm going to try to scan this. I'm not sure if I'll be able to pick them up in the scope, but a whole bunch of birds just landed on this exposed edge here. I'm pretty certain they were mourning doves. There they are. So again, these are a little far off, so kind of in the bottom part of your screen there. Actually, there's some up top too. So there's at least 5 mourning doves foraging on the ground there, looking for small seeds and other things like that. And so kingfishers, mourning doves, these killdeers, a lot of the birds that I've had here at the Huey holding ponds at the Clayton County Water Authority, these are our resident birds. They're here year round. Mourning doves are always going to be around here. Kingfishers, as long as we don't have such a hard freeze that all of our water is unavailable, they're going to be around. I grew up in the Midwest, and kingfishers would normally stick around, and they're pretty hardy birds unless there's a hard freeze and the ponds would freeze over, and then they would migrate a short distance just to find some open water. So they're going to be here year round, and they're going to be pretty much anywhere in the state that has water, has food for them. Got something bigger flying in. Another cormorant. So if you were with us earlier, we had a good group of cormorants, and I'm going to scan one more time over here just to show, for those of you who might not have been here right at the start, we have a beautiful great blue heron that has not moved, I don't think, since I've been out here. Again, a bird that in general is a resident. They don't like to move around too much. At the northern parts of the range, they will move if water freezes over, but in general, they stay around, kind of stake claim to their patch of water and foraging area. They nest in rookeries, so they'll nest colonially in like tall pine trees. So if you happen to be along the Chattahoochee or other major waterway and there's a pine stand, you definitely can find great blue herons nesting, 40, 50 feet up at the crown of some of our larger pines. But yeah, I don't think I have anything too new. If Karina, if you have anything over there, or if Danielle wants to plug any more of the exciting wetland stuff.
So right now we are driving kind of through the wetlands, and we just heard at least 5 sora, which are a really small bird species in the rail family. Ignore the carpet cleaner I have in the back of my car, but it's super, super cool. We're trying to get an eye on it, but they are very kind of secretive birds. They like to stay fairly hidden in tall wetland grasses. So as you can see over here, we've got lots of grasses here. And because of their size and because they tend to be like lower in the grass, they can be really hard to spot, but they have a very distinct call that if you've ever heard, for example, a gallinule, like a common gallinule, it sounds fairly similar. Say it again. Oh, we've got some coots, some American coots. All right. And there's just so much to see here. So we're hearing lots of Sora, and Danielle just pointed out to me that we have some American coots that are over here in this pond. So I'm going to turn around, first trying to get them in the scope. American coots are honestly one of my favorite birds in that family. Also related to gallinules. Here we go. They are a color almost like a navy blue color. I want to turn my camera around. This is similar to, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, let's see if I can get them in the binoculars. So American coots are like a really, really like a darkish bluish black color. This is pretty hard. I don't know if I'm getting it in this binoculars too well. Maybe I can zoom. And they've got white beaks, and their feet are, yeah, I'll walk down. Their feet are extremely unique, that serves them well for their life history. You know, they like to live in these wetlands and oftentimes walk on vegetation in the wetlands, and their feet are, they have these lobed, oh, there's a harrier! Oh my gosh, there's a harrier, this northern harrier. I hope I'm capturing it. Sorry to pivot so quickly. Northern harriers are raptors that oftentimes will hunt and live near wetlands, and they've got a really distinct white patch on their rump. Which is what I was able to see just now. Of course, now it is completely hidden in the tree line, but when you see a harrier, you got to stop and put that respect on its name. So that was a northern harrier. Very cool raptor. They're kind of the mark of, you know, summer is over. They usually come down this way after summer is done. But those, back to those American, their feet, which I could talk the rest of my life, they have these lobes on each of their, on each of their toes, and that really increases the surface area of their feet. I really encourage you to Google American color, very like bluish green, and just American coots, as well as some pied-billed grebes, all in this pond here. So that's what we're seeing right now, as well as the northern harrier, of course, watching. Are seeing anything out where you are right now?
Karina and each of you, can you remind everybody where you are when you come back on again?
Yes, we are at the treatment wetlands in Clayton County. We're kind of spaced out among the lands owned by this effort. Gabe is at the Newman wetlands that are being used to essentially capture natural, you know, rainwater, etc., to be used by the people who live in Clayton County, which is really awesome. And it's like a natural filtration system as well. So it was put here for the purpose of water conservation for the people who live in this county, but it also serves and doubles as really awesome wildlife habitat, especially for wetland loving birds, as well as other species of reptile and invertebrates like crustaceans. So a lot of biodiversity out here. But yeah, Gabe, if you are seeing anything, or Adam, oh, I see something. Adam has got his scope on something. Feel free to tell us about what you're seeing.
It's a bit far off, but I do have a visual on one of our killdeer. So I hope you could hear them when I was on earlier. They're flying right past my head. But yeah, walking right along the edge there, you can kind of make out they have a darker brown back and a white belly. Its head is to the right, and if it were to turn just a little bit more, they have like a double necklace. They have some black on their upper breast and a bright red eye, if you ever happen to see one up close. A couple things I'll mention to Karina's cool birds. So the coot and the harrier, those are both winter visitors to us here in Georgia. And the harriers are so cool. They kind of fly like a hawk, of course, but they also are kind of vulture-y. They don't flap too often. They fly real low over the marsh or the grassland, and they'll just drop down on small prey. And the young and the females are a beautiful kind of brown color with this great kind of disc on their face, but the males are this grayish color. They often have the nickname the gray ghost. And on a Georgia Audubon trip to Michigan last summer, we were looking for the rare Kirtland's warbler over this jack pine forest, and it was foggy, and it was real early in the morning. We had this just striking harrier come low over the pines and then drop down. So they are a really special bird that is always exciting during the winter months. One little ID thing I'll throw out, because I think people rightfully think, okay, harriers have white rumps, and so if I see a raptor with a white rump, it's going to be a harrier, which it is almost always. But late winter, early spring, before the harriers depart, especially in the Atlanta area, parts of the Piedmont, Cooper's hawks will do this territorial display where the males do a very deliberate, slow flight, and they flare out their undertail coverts and the feathers around the underside of their tail. That gives them a white rumped appearance. So I'll just put that out there as a word of caution. If you take a good look. They look very different, but if you get a quick look, you go, oh, that bird had a white rump. It's a harrier. That's quite rare for my Virginia Highlands, neighborhood. Just make sure it's not a Cooper's hawk, because that's a common mistake that can be made. We're looking at a great egret walking away from me right now. Oh, look at it, kind of coming at that crazy angle, trying to look for a fish. That's kind of neat. Large white wading bird, really wide range throughout the Americas, and a pretty common bird at most parts of Georgia. Again, if there's water or somewhere for them to find little prey items. I was kind of hoping with that neck and head movement, it might go after something. But yeah, I'll kick it. And again, sorry, my name is Adam. I'm the conservation director of Georgia Audubon, and I'm at the E.L. Huey holding ponds here at the Clayton County Water Authority. It's an eBird hotspot. If you've never been here and you know eBird, get on and look it up. You'll see all these just amazing birds that have shown up here. I'm trying to think of all the great birds I've chased down here. I know golden plover have shown up here, all sorts of cool shorebirds, all sorts of crazy ducks. It's just a fantastic spot throughout the year, but especially during shorebird migration and in the winter months when the ducks really show up in big numbers. It's a fantastic spot. And so I encourage you to get a pass and come out here. So I will kick it to you, Gabe. I feel like it's been a while. What do you got going on by the wetlands?
Yeah, so this is Gabe, Conservation Program Coordinator. And as Adam mentioned, I'm at the Wetlands Center. So this is actually open to the public. You don't have to get special permissions during the day. And it's really great because it's a little bit different habitat than the habitat that Karina and Adam and Danielle are all out at. Because this wetlands here is a little bit smaller, but also, right, as you can see here, there's nice forested habitat, which is going to provide a habitat for some different species of birds. A lot of woodpeckers in here, a lot of the thrushes, as we talked about earlier. But yeah, it's just really a great, really beautiful space. You can see there's some umbrella leaf magnolias right here. We have some beech trees with the smooth bark. We have some really nice young white oaks. And then as we make our way out to the wetland area along the side here, you can see there's some spice bush, which is a really great native. And one thing I like to point out whenever I'm at walking around spice bush this time of year is if you look at the leaves, you'll see a lot of the leaves have been chewed up, and that could be from the spice bush swallowtail caterpillar. And some people might be concerned if they have, some of their plants in their yard are being chewed up by certain insects they might view as pests. But it's actually a really good thing. If you have native plants in your backyard and they're being chewed on, that means they're playing their role in the ecosystem, and they're providing a place for insects to grow and thrive, and then birds to potentially eat some of those insects or other wildlife. So it can be really cool to take a look at a plant and see if it's been chewed on. You can look underneath the leaves and try and find caterpillars. Actually, right here, you can see this leaf has kind of been curled over on the side, and that could be a way to look for a caterpillar. But I actually think this might be from a type of spider that closes that, but I'm not entirely sure. But the insect world is something you can learn about to make you a better birder. Learning about the different plants that are going to be host to specific insects can be a lot of fun. So I just wanted to point that out. Now swinging back to the birds and still maintaining a plant focus. As I've been walking along the edge of this wetland, I've been noticing there's been some flowering plants that are flowering right now, like you can see right here. I don't know if you can make it out, but there's some orange flowers on this plant right here, and that's actually jewelweed, which is flowering this time of year in the late summer and through the fall, and it's one of the best last sources for migrating hummingbirds. And so I actually did see a hummingbird flying around here earlier, and it's starting to slowly get late for them. A lot of our hummingbirds have been moving through. However, some of them will stick around a little bit longer than others, and we occasionally do get western hummingbirds that come and migrate to the east. And there's another flowering plant that I don't see around me, but there was some earlier on. That's also another great source for hummingbirds, and it's the cardinal flower. So looking for cardinal flower and jewelweed, which are really, they like to have their feet wet. So looking wet areas can be a great way to try and spot hummingbirds if you're looking for hummingbirds this time of year. And so learning about the connections between the different plants and the birds can be a really great way to increase your birding. But it is really quiet right now around me. I'm not hearing too many birds. I heard some flying, or saw some flying off in the distance. But if anybody, or if any of you guys have any birds in your scope or in view, feel free to share, because I'm not having too much luck. There were some Carolina wrens, excuse me, flying around low to the ground and making their little bubbling sounds. Oh, here's a bird just flew in. Oh, I hear some eastern bluebirds. I don't know if you can hear that in the microphone, but they have a kind of a slurred, downward slurring. Oh, this is a catbird. So there's a gray catbird. It's a mimic related to the northern mockingbird and brown thrasher, and just flew off. But the catbirds, a lot of time I associate similarly with the brown thrasher. They like really thick, dense stuff like this. You can see this dense vegetation. It's a good place to look for catbirds and brown thrashers. But you can see this is a really just beautiful place to come bird. We have that snag up there. We have some birds sitting out. There's two eastern bluebirds, so those are the ones that we were hearing. So let's see if I can get them through so yeah, you can see one there and one at the top. But snags, so dead trees, are another great place to look for birds. They can be a pretty reliable place for birds to sit out and perch and get a good vantage point. These eastern bluebirds like to eat insects, and so it could be a good place for them to look for insects that might be out in the open. They'll swoop down and eat them up.
I've got,
oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Adam. We've seen a great egret today already, but there's another great egret over here on our side of the wetland where Danielle and I are, and it's foraging, looking for some yummy invertebrates. Again, those crayfish that are really dominating the invertebrate world over here in the wetlands that are native to Louisiana that we love to eat during our low country boils. The wading birds like great egrets also love to eat them. And also one random thing I would love for people to Google. So as you're Googling American coot feet, I would also encourage you to Google baby egrets and baby herons. They look very much like their dinosaur ancestors and are very, I mean, people don't really get to see them in real life, but there are some really cool captures of them. I would encourage you to look that up. Very cool. But yes, we have seen a great egret already today, but what were you going to say, Adam?
Well, I keep distracting myself, but I got something here. I rushed over in my car. If I can zoom in a little bit more. There's an eastern meadowlark right at the top of that tree. It's not the clearest of views, but hopefully you can make out kind of that brownish bird. You can see it flicking its tail, and the outer tail feathers are white. It'll show you that in flight. And this bird's got a stripy crown and a beautiful yellow front with a black necklace. They're actually in the blackbird family, even though they don't have any black on them. And while you're on this amazing Google search thing that Karina's put you on with coot feet and baby herons. Oh, I'm losing my meadowlark. Look up the African long claws. So there are multiple birds in Africa called long claws. And if you know what a meadowlark looks like, or if maybe I just introduced you to a meadowlark, they look almost identical. And it's a really cool example of convergent evolution, where you have birds that are not closely related. They're not even, geographically close. They're not in the same, taxonomic order. They're very different birds, but they look almost identical, and they've both filled a very similar niche on completely different parts of the globe. And the other cool bird that I am trying to get in the scope right now and struggling for some reason, there we go. We had some other ducks that were tucked in on this far side of the pond. These are northern shovelers. So if you get a good look, especially that second one in, there's a couple, look at the jumbo sized beaks. And so you have a couple males coming into their brighter plumage, like the far right bird. And there's a female, that last one, kind of similar like a mallard in color, but that huge, huge pale pink bill. And so they're a pretty common bird at some of our freshwater ponds and things like this. So teals, blue-winged and green-winged teals, these northern shovelers, which are migrant, they're just going to be here during the winter months in Georgia. They're a pretty cool bird. That one in the middle is showing the most color. When the males are really popping off, they have a beautiful green sheen to their head, and some bright colored feet and blue in the wing. So they're a very pretty duck, and they have that kind of comically large shovel-like beak, which is where they get their name of northern shoveler. Sometimes also, especially out here in Huey in the winter, I've had probably hundreds of shovelers, and they get in a really tight group, and they just spin and spin and spin and forage and churn up prey below them. So northern shovelers out here, along with some mallards and the green-winged teal that I showed you earlier. And it looks like I got, maybe, I know we're almost at the hour. These things always go so fast. It's great when we have good birds to show everyone. It really makes it go quicker. But we already mentioned thrashers and catbirds. Gabe mentioned, which he said they're similar in their habitat preference. They are cousins. They're in the Mimidae family, and maybe the most well-known member of the Mimidae family, or the mimics, is our northern mockingbird. Oh, and there it was. But you maybe could hear it over my talking. So all three mimids we were able to talk about with the mockingbird, the thrasher, and the catbird. Thrashers are state birds. They're here year round. We do get an influx of northern birds coming down. Mockingbirds are residents. They're here year round. The catbirds are only summer breeders, and they're going to be heading down to the Caribbean and Central America to spend the winter. So Melanie, it looks like we're at 9:58. So, I'll just thank everyone again. My name is Adam.
We do have to, before we go, Danielle does have an announcement to make.
Go for it.
If you don't mind. Okay, great.
Hey everyone. I should have said this in the beginning when I introduced myself and the space. So I run Newman Wetlands Center, where Gabe is, and that place is open to the public. Because of COVID, we do have some different hours than normal. We're open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. That'll change later on. We have we just hired someone new, so we have more staff now. But anyway, that place is open and free to visit. The place where Adam is called the E.L. Huey Holding Ponds, and that place is available to visit with a permit that you can purchase from the Wetlands Center. The permit covers the holding ponds, and then our reservoirs, J.W. Smith, Blaylock, and Shamrock, which in the winter, Shamrock and Blaylock are excellent to see waterfowl, and they're just really close by to where we all are, actually. And then the treatment wetlands, if you get an upgraded permit for $40 for the year, we have field trips out here. We have about one a month, sometimes two a month, and they're guided because the treatment wetlands part is closed to the public. If you guys have questions, feel free to reach out. You can call the Wetlands Center's main number, or you can, I'll put my email in the comments. You can email me. Yeah, the permits are, I think, a great value, but I'm biased since I work here. I'm going to give the phone back to Karina.
Hey, Karina, I'm going to chime in one thing real quick. I think it's apparent probably just from this hour that all the good birds this place has to offer. But as Daniel mentioned at the beginning, this is kind of a rare wetland, complex or system for the Piedmont. there are always amazingly uncommon birds that show up here. You know, there's been limpkins and there's been all sorts of wading birds and rails. It's not only good just from the diversity it has, but it's really prone to pulling up vagrant, uncommon birds for our part of the state or our part of the eastern U.S. So definitely worth the permit, definitely worth getting out here. And we're always happy to spend time with Danielle and to partner with her in any way possible, and everyone else down here at Clayton County.
Well, thanks everyone. It was great to see all the fun things that you were seeing down there. I encourage everyone watching to go check it out. It's a wonderful place. And we will see you in a couple of weeks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.